a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's February 14th here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Kim Xiang.
Good morning, Yang.
And Nell Song.
Hi, everyone.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Now, every day we do make a news feed for the new generation, and we're looking at the top trending hashtags on social media over the past 24 hours. Here they are. The first hashtag is Valentine's Day. Lovers in Korea can finally go on dates on this romantic day without their masks, and that's why restaurants, hotels, and cafes have been promoting their signature menus or commemorative dishes for this holiday. South Korea celebrates Valentine's Day a bit differently than other countries. In Korea, it's women who give men chocolates and gifts. Then 1 month later on White Day, it's men who give women candy. The second hashtag is hamburgers. Hamburger prices have gone up yet again here in Korea. Fast food restaurant chains in the country have decided to increase their menu prices by around 5%. This is the second time in just 6 months that franchises like McDonald's and No Brand Burger have done so. And local hamburger branch franchise Lotteria has also increased its prices. Companies said they had no choice because operating costs have increased, as well as ingredients, logistics, and labor costs. The last hashtag is Rescue Team. The South Korean disaster response team has rescued 8 people since it started its mission last Thursday to find more survivors from the devastating Turkey and Syria earthquake. The South Korean team is getting a lot of recognition and applause for its efforts, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the team will continue high-intensity search and rescue operations in regions where potential survivors could be found. Now, why don't we delve a bit deeper into the third hashtag, Rescue Team? Now, speaking of South Korea helping Turkey out when it's most at need, Turkey has actually done the same in the past for South Korea, and there's an illustration that shows just how. The first picture shows a Turkish soldier caring for war orphans during the Korean War from 1950 to 53. Turkey had become the 4th largest military contributor to the UN forces in Korea. Around 15,000 Turkish troops served in Korea during the war. The very next image then shows a Korean emergency rescue team helping a child in Turkey who is surrounded by rubble from the recent earthquake. 118 firefighters and army personnel went to Turkey last Wednesday to help with search and rescue operations. Now, it's the largest ever Korean rescue team dispatched for international relief, and this illustration was drawn by a Korean cartoon illustrator, Myung Min-ho. Myung uploaded the 2 photos side by side on his Instagram, and there he said he conveyed his deepest sympathy to the, quote, brother country or Turkey. He also sent his deepest condolences to Syria, which is also suffering with just as much damage. Now, I would like to expand the news feed here in the studio. And Nael, did you see this illustration and what did you think about it?
Yes, I did see it, and it's very emotional. It's really touching, and I've actually been to Turkey multiple times as well. And you know, it's not a lie. They are the brother nation. We go there when they recognize that I'm Korean. They are saying, "Oh, you're our brothers, and we love you so much." And they have such warm hearts. So it's really heartbreaking to see Turkey as well as Syria going through this traumatic incident, and I'm thankful that Korea gets to be a part of helping them out just as much as they were here for us when we needed them.
Definitely. And Xiang, a lot of people are applauding Korea's dispatched rescue team. And what exactly are people saying to them?
Sure. On top of the initial dispatch of Korean emergency relief team to Turkey on the 8th of February, President Yoon said that South Korea will send a second group of rescuers the day after tomorrow, on Thursday the 16th. This includes a separate group of 29 medical staff planned to dispatch within a week's time. The presidential office said on Monday that Korea will also establish a separate unit within state ministries to organize relief and fundraising activities to support Turkish people who lost their families and homes to this tragic natural disaster. Many are applauding Korea's efforts within as well as outside of Korea. Donations are kindly being made all across the world, as well as many Koreans supporting various emergency relief programs. On behalf of the Korean people, I sincerely hope that a fast recovery can be made amidst the global support.
Definitely. We're all hoping for that. And thank you so much. That was our news feed for today. Now, moving on from avocado on toast to OK Boomer, intergenerational satire is something that happens all over the world. But can such satire have more far-reaching consequences? Take a look at the screen. Nowadays, there are few things many millennials and Gen Z in Korea think twice before doing. That includes wearing wireless earphones at work and turning down lunch with their superiors. That's because these are a few traits exaggerated and used as satirical content on comedy shows to describe the younger generation. Like any joke, the first couple of times could be funny, but endless repetition could come across as ignorant or offensive. That's exactly what a growing number of the new gen are thinking about satirical content against them. Today, News Gen looks at 3 questions. 1. Just how relatable or realistic is the satirical content on young people in Korea? 2. Which points anger or enthuse the younger audience? 3. How has such content affected millennials and Gen Z in the workplace? As we just saw, we're going to be talking about comedy shows or YouTube shorts using satire to describe the traits of millennials and Gen Z. Now, they've been going viral on social media, so I would like to ask our panels whether they've seen content like this, starting with Nell. Nell? Nell?
Is she okay?
Is she okay? Nell, can you hear me?
Oh no.
Nell?
Oh no.
Okay, Nell, could you please take off your earphone for a second?
You got your...
I just asked you a question.
My total level of efficiency and focus goes up with my noise-canceling earphones. Could you please respect my working boundaries and workflow? Thank you.
Okay. But could you just take it off for 1 second? I have a question for you real quick. Yeah. I have one question. Have you ever watched satirical content on Gen Z and millennials?
We're watching one now.
I know.
Yes, actually, no, I have. And this is actually a really popular video,
Right.
and it's been trending so much. And people talk about millennials and Gen Z. In Korea, we call them MZ. And this content has been trending so much of how, because it's been so funny to see how millennials and Gen Z do in the workplaces. And when we talk about them, it's usually the people in their 20s and 30s. And they're gaining a lot of popularity. And they're hilarious.
And you just saw one right now.
I did.
But apart from this, have you ever watched such content?
I have, and I think there's a clear sort of division between the Korean content and sort of the international English-speaking domain, I would say. Korean content usually seems to focus on workplace environment, like as Nell demonstrated for us. Workplace behaviors, it was young generation's individualistic behavior away from the societal norms and things like that. Whereas on the other hand, the international sort of satire, satirical clips and things like that will convey an image of usage of pronouns, such as he, him, they, them, or her, she.
Because it's Valentine's Day.
It is. Yeah. As well as more of a, the emphasis on the assumption that the younger generation is more sort of mentally weaker than the previous generation. Which, of course, for a millennial myself, it's partially offensive for me as well. But if the comedy is well executed, it's definitely more, hilarious than offensive.
And you mentioned a really good point right there. Some are partially offended by this misrepresentation, and some even say they feel like they're uncomfortable or even misjudged at work.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the sense of Korean societies and Korean workplaces, I think that's a commonplace. After the, a few satirical clips and comedy shows conveyed the younger generation, what we call the MZers in South Korea, and how they behave in workplaces, it's easy to sort of pick out any sort of not normal behavior, having your phone call. Even for me, when I have my earphones in for a conference call in the office, someone might be saying, oh, are you watching a YouTube clip?
Right.
Are you listening to music? What song are you listening to? Which is, definitely a misrepresentation and can often lead to misjudgment in workplaces.
I think you definitely have to think twice before putting on AirPods
Exactly,
or wireless
nowadays,
earphones in the office.
But then again, I would like to point out that satire, like we mentioned, is an exaggeration of reality. So it's relatable, but it's exaggerated. It's not necessarily the reflection of reality as, proportionally. And, comedy is comedy. And I think to a certain degree, it should be enjoyable and it's relatable. So I don't think it's that big of a problem.
But I think there's still a divided response as to how millennials Millennials and Gen Z are taking this as. Why do you think that is the case?
I mean, I think it's basically a similar feeling of stereotyping racial groups, if I give an extreme example, racial groups into certain characteristics. So by saying, you know, the younger generation is like this and have a convey an image of them in the media, in the mainstream media especially, and social media, which is also becoming mainstream these days, it will definitely have potential for a negative connotation surrounding the younger generation, which definitely feels quite negative for us.
And what about you, Nell?
You know, I think when stereotypes start being used to categorize people and judging people in a negative way, then it becomes an issue. But, you know, like I keep saying, it's comedy, and, you know, people would be angered if it's taken that far to categorize a certain generation. But, you know, as we say here in Korea, you know, some people take comedy as documentary, and I'm just gonna say, loosen up, you know?
Loosen up, take the joke as a joke. But I believe that there are both pros and cons to this type of content. What do you think, Xiao?
Definitely. I mean, like, you know, it's actually quite nice that these sort of traits of the new generation is being portrayed as a satire in the sense of comedy. It gives a sort of the general audience a better understanding of what the MZers, what we call, or the new generation Gen Zs and Millennials might be thinking, the differences in behavior they might be taking, as well as the characteristics, generational characteristics, valuing personal space and valuing sort of individual time over, you know, spending extended time in doing group activities in a company setting and things like that. I mean, cons would definitely be what I said before, stereotyping. So, I mean, I think this is also a big social issue here, and something that I felt personally as well in South Korea. Either you are an MZer who doesn't really work well, who's got poor work ethics and, you know, always has their earphones in, never sets up the table for the you know, seniors and things like that. Or if you're not doing any of that, you automatically get called a konde or chagul which we mentioned a few episodes back. So I think that sort of divide and bipolar sort of division is quite unhealthy for society and should, you know, be changed in certain ways.
Definitely. So it feels like you either fall into the konde category, or the typical MZ.
Yeah, there's no middle ground in the stereotype.
All right, and why don't we use this time to hear from another fellow global millennial, and let's see whether people abroad can relate to our discussion topic for today. As we mentioned, we're now going to hear from Lee Roddy. He's a radio host of Lively Radio who's currently in Singapore. Great to have you here, Lee.
Sorry, just 1 second. Busy posting to my... I'm sorry, I missed your question. What were you saying?
I love it. I love it. Exactly. That surprised me a little bit. Lee, I'm guessing that you've already know and are very familiar with the topic of today, but as a radio host, did you ever present content using satire to describe distinctive traits of the younger generation? And how popular do you think this type of content is?
You know, I honestly have to say, regretfully, no. Our radio show, I think, is very silly. We use a lot of satire for a lot of different things. But honestly, we never thought of making fun of the MZ generation. So you're giving me ideas for content now.
That's great.
Yeah. But I think that it is quite popular, and I think it's becoming increasingly popular because, I mean, you guys were touching on this before. As the MZ generation becomes more and more prominent in the workplace, there's also a lot of self-awareness that's coming. So I think when you see this content, you have to think about who's, not just what the content is, but who's making the content. And I feel like predominantly the people who are making fun of the MZ generation is the MZ generation themselves.
Good point.
Right, and before we move on, I would like to clarify for our viewers out there, MZ in Korea, we're talking about mostly those in their 20s and 30s, though Millennials and Gen Z include all the way
Of
up to
course,
those
yeah,
40s.
of
But
course.
Xiang, you have a question too.
Yes, Lee, I mean, have you ever come across such content produced in Korea? So Korean sort of satirical comedy that you might have seen?
Yeah, I have seen a lot in Korea actually. It's interesting that there is a distinct difference in the comedy and topics between stuff that's happening like in the West and the US and in Korea. Like you said, it does
Exactly,
focus a little bit more on the workplace. One of the pieces of content that I saw, it wasn't necessarily satire, but it was on social media and they took 5 men. And the 5 men, they had to all communicate through text. And they had to identify who was the secret 20-year-old, who wasn't the, yeah, and so it was quite amusing, and it was supposed to kind of like highlight the way that boomers usually talk to one another and communicate. And in the end, it actually became funnier because the millennial, his traits were coming through so obviously that they were able to identify which one
Right.
clearly wasn't the boomer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's
Very
hilarious.
interesting.
I also have a question for you. As we've mentioned before, some of these contents, they could lead to, overgeneralization and exaggeration, which could make the generation gaps a little bit worse. Do you have any ideas on this? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are comedy is good. Satire is good. I think honestly, it makes the truth more digestible. Because I mean, it's like taking the truth and it's encoding it in something that can penetrate. It makes everyone laugh, right?
Yeah.
But then there's the aftertaste. And you go home and you think about it. You go, you know what? Actually, maybe I am perceived as a millennial in the workplace. Maybe I am perceived like that. And you have a little bit more self-awareness. And I think in the same way too, the older generations can see, oh, my judgments, my initial judgments of the way that millennials are and act isn't the whole picture. So I think it's pretty good. I think actually, to be honest, where the problem comes in, I think, is when comedy and bits that people use as satire start bleeding into professional places.
Yes.
As back in 2019, there was this in New Zealand Parliament. One of the representatives, she was presenting a bill on climate change, and there was someone who loudly objected, who was in his 50s or something like that, and she said, "Okay, boomer," And this is actually when that "okay, boomer" trend kind of started.
Oh, no.
And I think it's stuff like this, or when you say, "Hey, this satirical content, you can't do this. It's offensive."
Yeah.
I think that's actually what creates the generational
Yes.
gap, exaggerates the generational gap a little bit more. Comedy, actually, I think it brings it together and helps the two gaps understand each other.
Definitely.
Definitely. I think there is a fine line between how we can use it moderately to narrow down any generational gaps we have. Thank you so much, Lee. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, now bring the discussion back to the studio. Any points that Lee made that fascinated you, Xiang?
All points that Lee made was fantastic. I mean, he made really good points. I think as a radio host as well, he's been through a lot of social issues. He seems to be very aware of the generation divide, not just in where he's at, probably in Singapore, but globally as well. I mean, one fine point he made was self-awareness as well as comedy, satirical comedy, or just comedy in general, being a source of very digestible information to better understand the different generations and things like that.
Yeah.
And it does breaks it in easier for the older generation to understand the
Yeah.
younger generation better as well.
Yeah,
Definitely. And what about you now?
I think I agree with Xiong in that, Lee said that comedy is great. I love comedy as well. And I think when he drew that boundary line of if you start to bring that into the workplace, that could become an unhealthy thing. And
Exactly.
using that to attack somebody is not the intent. Yeah.
Exactly, because I think the intention of comedy is to make people laugh,
Exactly,
bring people
yeah.
Yeah, bring
together.
people together, yeah.
It's not to attack or make someone bleed to death, right? All right. And given that we are a live morning program, we always ask our viewers questions related to our discussion topic in advance, and we use this time to share with you what they had to say. So take a look at the screen. We asked our viewers how they feel about satire against millennials and Gen Z. Is it just comedy, or is it offensive to group an entire generation to a stereotype? Commander Keen Keane said, the quality of writing is a huge part here. If you're offended by well-written satire, then you deserve to be satirized. And Cynthia Taylor said, naturally, any form of generalization can be harmful, but it could also be used as a platform to accept the differences between generations. And Raul said, there's a fine line between satire, jokes, and hurtful, offensive content. If there are silly jokes, that's fine, but you need to be respectful if you want respect yourself. Now, what do you guys think about our viewers' comments?
Yeah, I mean, if I comment on Commander Keane's, comment first, I think that's very true. As I said before, I mean, it definitely can be portrayed as partially offensive for the target generation. If you're the target of comedy, then it does become, is this being funny, or is this making fun of me personally? It might feel a personal attack. But, as I said before, if it's well executed, well written, as Commander Keane said, then it's definitely a good piece of satire and it's hilarious.
Exactly. What about you, Nal?
I think I actually agree with what Raul said. You know, there's a fine line between satire and jokes and hurtful, offensive comment. And like we mentioned that with Lee, the boundary line of, where we're going to use that, how we're going to use that towards people. And then they said, be respectful if you want to be respected. And, just treat other people like you want to be treated.
Right, and I agree with Cynthia Taylor. I think it could be a great platform to accept and understand different generations, for sure.
Definitely.
Exactly, and every day we do upload questions related to our discussion topic for our viewers to answer. And if you want to participate, please search ArirangNews on YouTube and look into our community tab. The link is right below. Now, we've already come to the final part of our discussion for today. Time flies. Exactly. Final thoughts on today's topic, Xiang.
I think today's topic is interesting, not only in the sense of just talking about what sort of comedy that exists, what sort of satirical, or just comedy in general that targets, that uses, the younger generation as a source, is about. But I think we should delve into, have a deeper sort of thought about it and realize that this individualism or sort of expressing your opinion more freely that you can see in the younger generation is the beginning, is the root of all societal change. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's today or 100 years ago. That's how society changes. That's how they break the social new norms. That's how new rules take place. That's how, different social groups can actually be seen as the majority and things like that. So I really do hope that the younger generation keeps what they're doing now, keeps their traits rather than losing it because some comedy show made fun of it or something, and really speak your voice, really say what you got to say and make those changes you think is right.
Exactly. And Xiang, wasn't it quite interesting how Lee mentioned that it's not the older generation that's making this type of content. It's actually us.
Exactly,
We're making it. So it seems to be fine, right?
It seems to be fine, and I think that's why we can execute it. That's why a lot of it is really good, because we know what we are doing. We know how some of us work in the workplace, how we behave, and the differences to the older generation is clearer in our eyes more than the older generation.
Definitely.
So I think that's a really good source of comedy.
And I would now like to ask Nael for her final thoughts. Now you put on your wireless earphones once again.
It's Valentine's Day and I have a date today. No cap. This combo is high-key giving longer work hours, so we really need to do a vibe check here. And so please respect my boundaries and working hours. Thanks, besties.
Will do. All right, that's what we've talked about today. Today we talked about the generation gaps and how they're shown in satire here in Korea. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you the topics that young people are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Xiao.
My pleasure, Ian.
And Nael Song.
So much fun.
It was so much fun.
It really was.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.